Hey guys doing? I'm live. How you guys doing? Um, I want to do a rant that it's a bad rant, but I want to do a rant that I haven't done to the extent that I'm going to do it. I don't think I've touched on it, but I want to go a little further maybe, and just make a video mainly about that, not just passingly mentioning it. I want to talk about the world history of Western music. I don't know everything about it, and of course, and I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything, but that's I just like to share what I know about it, what I think about it, if that's okay. So, anyway, I don't know a lot about Eastern music. I don't know a lot about Indian music and Chinese music. I guess Indian music uses sometimes some of their scales have 22 notes in them rather than 12, and sometimes in China they have 5 notes instead of 12. I don't understand that. They have a sitar in India, and they play ragas where you just have one drone and then a bunch of notes on top of it. I don't really understand that. I don't know why that would not be boring at some point, because don't you want to change the tone? Don't you want a different tone more than just one tone the whole time? I mean, isn't that kind of monotonous? Literally, monotonous means one tone. Mono, one tone, tone, monotonous. And then Chinese music that has 5 notes only. I don't understand how that's enough notes. Don't you want more notes than that in an octave? Then again, in the 22 note thing with the Indian thing, isn't that too many notes? I don't know. But I'd like to stick mainly with Western music, which is more I know more about than I do Eastern and whatever the other kind of musics are called, if it's Eastern or Middle Eastern or whatever. I break it down into 4 categories, like I've said. I have jazz at the top. No, I don't. Yes, I do. Jazz at the top, that's the most complex because it uses 7-note scales and 4-note chords, aka 7th chords. And country at the bottom, that's the simplest because it uses pentatonic scales, 5-note scales, and triads, 3-note chords. And then on west or left, I have classical music, which is a combination of simple and complex. It has 7-note scales but 3-note chords. And on the right, or you could call it east, I have blues, which is also a mixture. It has 5-note scales, pentatonic scales, but 7-note chords, aka 4-note chords, aka 7th chords. I think that defines the difference. But I'd like to talk about maybe in more depth. Classical music culturally, I guess, was European music, and it was very aristocratic music. It was a few hundred years ago, and white people music and European music, and very aristocratic, rich people playing it and everything, and very defined difference between major and minor in the music. They wanted a different sound of major versus minor. They don't want to blend it together like blues and sometimes jazz. But they wanted to, now I'm in major, now I'm in minor. They didn't just mix major and minor much. And a triad, if you played a triad, it was major or minor, and it made a difference. You didn't easily go from A major to A minor or B minor to B major. He didn't do that very easily without a bunch of shock. And so and then you were either in a major key or a minor key. You didn't play, you didn't easily go from the key of C major to the key of C minor. That was shocking. It'd be like, what are you doing to me? Why are you changing from major to minor? With the exception of maybe if you change to a minor of a different key than the starting key, it would be more acceptable, such as C major to A minor. Well, they have the same key signature, so it's not as shocking, but it still made a difference. It matters if you're in A minor versus C major, and to flesh out all that major minor differences, you needed a 7-note scale. Plus, they were very intellectual, advanced people. They didn't want to play 5-note scales. Not enough for them. 7-note scales. But they didn't need the dissonance in the harmonies that 4-note chords provide. With 7th chords, you have actually a major second interval involved in the actual harmony, because the 7th is the fourth note of a fourth note in third tertial, thirdal harmonies, is seventh, which is actually in have a half step or whole step or an augmented step below the root. Is that you, and that's part of the harmony, like a single scale, a second or single scale degree or scale interval was part of the actual harmony, which is very dissonant compared to just using triads, where you don't have the major, minor, or augmented second involved in the harmony, and just play. You just don't have this four note chords. Actually, make a lot of, even if however you put it, there's a lot of mishmash or there's a lot of it's very thick. There's a lot of room for dissonance because you have so many notes clustered into one chord, and classical doesn't like that. They like the cleaner, pure tones of just I'm in a major triad, minor triad, and it's prettier to them. Put too many notes in a chord, eventually it just sounds like garbage. But yet not enough notes, it just sounds monotonous. So there's like a scale there or a spectrum. But classical like the major and minor triad, and then sometimes you have the diminished triad or sometimes an exception to the rule about not liking four note chords is when the dominant seventh was introduced. At some point, people did like the dominant seventh on the dominant chord of dominant degree of the key you're in, such as if you're in A minor, you have an E seventh, dominant seventh. If you're in C major, you have G seventh, dominant seventh. You don't just have that's one exception. They would let that go because that tension between G dominant seventh to C major or E dominant seventh to A minor was actually pleasant to them. Like that, the fact that you have the fourth degree in the five chord, which is a minor seventh or major second if you look at it the other way, downward, that helped, that defined the key really well too. It defined the key better than just all triads. If you just play C major, F major, G major, C major, sometimes you don't know what key you're in. You could be playing, it's more ambiguous. If you play G7, F major, C major, then you know you're in C major. It's very defining when you get that tritone in the harmony that the dominant seventh has. The tritone between the major seventh, the major third and the minor seventh is cool to them. They like that sound. And then they called it the devil in music though, because it was not as pretty as the perfect fifth or perfect fourth. But it was necessary for the music to exist. You just can't, but you can't get rid of it, but yet you can call it the devil. Diminished triads have this as the root and the fifth, between the root and the fifth, and the dominant sevenths have it between the third and the seventh. And then they would even, they liked another thing too. In harmonic minor scales on the leading tone degree, you have a diminished seventh, and that's actually can be considered a dominant 7 flat 9 without the root. Where if you call it a dominant 7 flat 9 without the root, let's say you're in A minor, you have an E dominant 7 flat 9, let's say, which is actually a G. Without the E, that's a G sharp diminished seventh, and that's all. That has two tritones in it. And very dissonant, but when it resolves to the root, the tonic progression, the tonic chord, that's such as G sharp diminished seventh to A minor triad, very, very, very dramatic and very, very, very profound and very subtly, uplifting and inspirational. They like that sound. So it's not like they never played dissonances. They just didn't like dissonance all the time when the simpler chord would do. Whereas jazz, I'm going to get to that later, they did like that. But anyway, and rhythmically with classical music, they didn't really do swing that much. It was straight notes, like if you have a 1, 2, 3 for 1/8 notes, it's 1, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1. It's not 1 2 1 2. They didn't swing it like that. 1 2 1 2 1 2, which is really triplets, but putting the first two together we call swing. And they didn't really do that in classical. They weren't grooving to the dance floor like that. They just like 1 2 1 2 1 2 or sixteenths 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. What about that? 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. You're like that, not dun 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 or anything or dun 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 dun. I think the first one of those was inverted swing. I did 16th notes that were inverted swing. That is triplets, but the second two are tied together. That would be like marching bands. Whereas if you do triplets with the first two together, that's swing or regular swing. I call inverted swing. The inverted swing is this. Swing is, and straight is like that. The classical people didn't think about swing. They just liked the straight, the way it is on paper is supposed to be type of thing. You know, you got to start somewhere with music. You can't just have all innovation all at once, or you have everything happen all at once, which is why time exists. So everything doesn't happen all at once. And I didn't make up that quote. My ex-mentor John Harrelson, who died, had a quote that he made up. Time exists so that everything doesn't happen all at once. So I borrowed that from John. So it's not my own thought. Anyway, that's classical for you. Now, the other extreme to that, to me, is blues music, because culturally it was slaves, black people, poor and more modern than a couple hundred years ago, but not directly today, but more modern. American versus European, very poor versus aristocratic, and these people just they just made a music just to survive. Like it got them through the day to just chant and sing about their woe, to express it so they don't go nuts. They made art instead of making craziness, which is what we should do today. I try to do that. If you're in a bad situation, sing the blues. And it was another to me, that the blues and the classical are the greatest two genres or segments of Western music that there ever were. Not those two together. Those two make the root of everything else and make everything else possible to me. And let's talk about it. The blues had 3 chords, 1 4 5, similar to classical. That's just logical because it comes from a circle of fifths. You're just starting with a note with a chord in the middle, and then go up a fourth, and then down a fourth, or up a fifth, down a fifth, from the tonic in the middle. That seems logical, but they didn't care about the difference between major and minor. They didn't care about, am I in major and am I in minor? When they went to play a triad, DJ Alberson's the first person that ever said this that I heard. It might have been to me, it might not have been, but I don't know. He said it though. It might have been to me, I don't know. But he said, in classical music, they had a major third and a minor third. Well, the blues people didn't have that. They had a third that was just a generic third, somewhere in the middle between the two, or at least only one third. They didn't have a major third and a minor third. They didn't bother with that. That's a lot of the genesis of the sound of blues came from that fact. So if you have 3 chords, they don't have to be major or minor. They can be just all the same. Just 3 chords that are all kind of majorish and minorish at the same time. That's the key. That's one of the keys of blues, is the major and minor at the same time, because we have 12 notes. When you're vocalizing, when you're singing, you can sing between the 2 thirds, the major third and the minor third. But you can bend on a guitar string. There you have it. Minor third to major third. It's all about that in blues, a lot of it. Piano can't do that, but they can go major third, minor third, back and forth, which simulates that. But there's the play, there's the idea that in our 12-tone system, that it's major and minor at the same time as far as the harmonies, the chords. And that reflects, when you write it on paper in Western terms, it reflects in a lot of modal things and bending and kind of a lot of cool stuff that classical people didn't do. They just didn't. And then and for the harmonies, they liked the dissonance of the dominant seventh. They said, come on, bring it on. So all three chords were of the tonic, dominant, and subdominant were all dominant seventh chords, not just the dominant chord like in classical music, but you had a one chord that was 1/7. That is one dominant seventh. If you're in C, that's C major, C dominant seventh, C seventh. Then F is the 4 chord, you'd have F seventh. G is the 5 chord, G seventh. They liked that dissonance. It became part of the whole thing to them. And that's unique to Western music that classical didn't really have. Yeah, they people in later classical music, the Impressionists and 20th century people, they all did the dissonances too. But that a lot of that is progress, and I'm not going to go into that because I'm not an expert. I don't have a PhD in music, in musicology, but what I think of classical music is the starting origins of it. Yes, you can change everything later. You know, if you're Rachmaninoff or Stravinsky or Shostakovich or Baird, Weber or Schoenberg, you know, anybody can do anything different than what was done. Debussy, but let's just, to me that's all alteration. That's great, but that's not the origin of the music. It's not what started. It was not where it started. And I'm more of an originist or something like that. I like, not the very beginning when they didn't even know a chord, but I like Mozart and Bach and Beethoven kind of thing. I mean, yeah, I went through a phase in college where all I liked was dissonant stuff. I liked Alan Holdsworth and anything even more dissonant than that. But what do you call it? Messiaen, Oliver Messiaen, Machon, I guess it's called. Boulez, Boulez, Pierre Boulez, I think his name is. Ignoxis starts with X, and Zoxis, his last name starts with X. I don't know where I got into that, and then I got it out of my system. I just flushed it out. I did that as much as a person could do almost. And then I thought, oh, well, now what? And then when the tribute album came out with Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads, I just got straight back into heavy metal, rock and roll, and I know I liked that dissonant crap a long time ago, but I got it out of my system or something. I don't need that anymore. I like music that I actually like to listen to, not just music that sounds bad for its own sake. But anyway, or dissonant for its own sake. Let's not say bad, but dissonant. I just like to hear I like to be moved by the melody and the harmony. It's harder to be moved by dissonance to me. If it's very dissonant, it just jars you, and that's not the movement I'm after. I want to flow with it. But anyway, whatever. So I was on blues now. I'm talking about blues. And blues did like the swing. They like the swing. Dun, 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 dun. They don't want to go dun, dun. That marching sound was for, German cadets or something to them, and war music, marching. They weren't that way. They wanted to just relax and groove and swing in the fields, and they liked the swing rhythm, not the straight dun 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 dun. They didn't like that marching feel. They liked dun dun dun. They liked that, and that's a very important introduction in Western music that the blues brought by that. And then you have interesting things in the scales. Like I said, they like simple scales. They don't need all those complex 7-note scales to show the differences between major and minor, which is essentially what 7 notes will do for you. With 5-note scales, it's more primitive, but then again, not sometimes, because you add things like the blue note, like the flat 5 to a monopentatonic scale, very awkward, very dissonant, very avant-garde if you look at it that way. And I've talked about before where that comes from. If you're in C blues, then if you play let's see, how do I do this? If you play an E, let's say you're in C minor pentatonic, okay? And the relative major pentatonic to that is E flat major pentatonic. So you have E flat major pentatonic, but you want to play but that's E flat major. What if you want to make it minor, just for fun, and mix it up? So you have E flat minor over C minor. Well, E flat minor, the minor third, is G flat, and in C, G flat is a flat 5. Flat 5. But I said I was in C minor pentatonic, so the flat 5 which is G flat added to a C minor pentatonic scale makes a C blues scale. That's some intricate headwork, actually, that blues doesn't get enough credit for sometimes. They just, because people don't understand where that flat 5 comes from, so they don't learn it, talk about it, or discuss how great of an introduction that was. But that's a cool thing to me. The reverse of that is what I've called the Wiseman scale at some point, was when you take, let's say that I'm in, let's do it again. Let's say I'm in C major pentatonic. Okay, I'm in C major pentatonic. Fair enough, but that's also A minor pentatonic. But what if I want to make that minor pentatonic major just for the heck of it? That gives me a C sharp for the third. So, because if you're in A minor, make the third major, you have C sharp. But I said I was in C major pentatonic, but now I have a C sharp. That's interesting too. That's a major pentatonic with a flat 2. You can call it a sharp root, but that's stupid. That sounds bad. Sounds weird. Sharp 2 is flat. Sharp 1 is flat 2, so let's call it flat 2. Major pentatonic with the flat 2 in it. That, I think that existed before I called it the Wiseman scale, but it wasn't very widely used or documented, and I call it the Wiseman scale. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I called the minor version of that the Wiseman scale, because if you're an A minor pentatonic and you just play a major third over that, you have any minor with it with a C sharp. That's a A minor pentatonic with a C sharp could be called the Wiseman, what I used to call the Wiseman scale. It's just you take a minor scale, a minor pentatonic, and add a major third to it, and that gives you a minor pentatonic with a major third, which is analogous to the blues scale, actually, where in the blues scale you have a minor pentatonic with a flat 5. In the Wiseman scale, you have a minor pentatonic with a major third. And that's interesting too, because if you combine the two, you get a really cool blues thing where you have a minor pentatonic with a major third and a flat 5. I like to call that, I'll call that the Steve Ray Vaughan scale, if you want to call it that. That's all the notes he used, mostly. Pentatonic, minor pentatonic with the major third, or minor pentatonic with the flat 5. Those 7 notes made up just about everything he played, and he was good. But if you want to go further and add the major second and the major 6 from the Dorian mode, or from the Mixolydian mode, whichever way you want to look at it, now you have 9 notes, and that's sometimes called the composite blues scale. It's all the notes you can play in blues. The only notes not mentioned are the flat 9, flat 2nd, minor 6, and major 7th. Otherwise, any note goes. So people don't usually play that as a whole scale directly, like in line, but those are some available notes you have. The other notes are typically non-bluesish. A flat 9, flat 6 isn't bluesy. A major 7th isn't bluesy, and a minor 2nd isn't bluesy. But there's always exceptions to that. What about the fact that sometimes when you're in C blues, you play C sharp 7 to C7. That works, but that has a C sharp not only as a note, but as a root. A lot of weirdness in music, eh? The flat 6 almost never really does get played, but sometimes it does. Sometimes if you're ending on an E blues, you can go from C7 to B7, a flat 6 7th, or to a dominant 7th, and that seems to work. Only note I haven't mentioned now is the major 7th, and that can work in the eruption idea. Hear that? He's playing a Dorian when he goes that's Dorian. That's the root to the major 7th, and then That's the minor seventh, dun, and that's the major sixth. So he's actually using the whole tone between the minor seventh and the root, and putting a chromatic note between it, which is the major seventh, but only as a passing note. You don't end on that. Dun, 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 and that's the 5, flat 5, 4, minor third, and then the root. If you hear the eruption, part of the intro to Eruption, or Manic Depression by Jimi Hendrix does that. Dun 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 dun. That dun dun dun. That's what is it? Yeah, that's 4, flat 5, 5, and then dun dun dun. That's minor seventh, major seventh, root. He's playing the major seventh as a passing tone between the minor seventh and the root. So even the major seventh can be used. I mean, when does it stop? We're gonna have 24 note now. We're gonna have quarter notes. That's where you have 24 notes per octave, sometimes called quarter tones. If the semitone is 12 notes per octave, then a quarter tone is 24 notes per octave, or half of a semitone. Weird. I've actually heard that a couple times in my dissonance days. Didn't like it even then, I don't think, but whatever. Music's very interesting, eh? So then I've talked about blues a little, and I've talked about classical. Hope you enjoyed this talk. Jazz and country just kind of borrow from classical and blues, but just even in jazz case, they take the more complex route. And in country case, they take the more simple route. So in jazz music, you have the 7-note scales of classical music, but you have the 4-note chords of blues. So you basically have 7th chords with diatonic scales. So you have 4-note chords, 7-note scales. So, AKA the most complex, combination you can get from tonal music possibilities. And I'm not going to go too much into jazz. They use a lot of swing, but like blues did. But not, I guess, I think they always swung. I think they swung a lot. If it don't mean a thing, if it ain't got that swing, what is that? Louis Armstrong or something? It had to swing to be jazz. So they got jazz beat. Faster than blues maybe, but still swung. And lots of complex harmonies. They like the dissonance thick, harmonies, 7th chords, and even 9th, 11th, and 13th sometimes, and complex harmony, swing rhythm, diatonic scales, but not even just ending its diatonic scales. They like to add chromatic notes to the diatonic scale. They thought of it almost chromatically. Jazz is almost chromatic, actually. You get enough chords going on that are 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th. Next thing you know, you're just playing a chromatic scale for your line, for your solo. Between any of the 5 whole steps of a major scale, you can put a passing tone, and it sounds good in jazz if you play it the right way at the right time. Any note goes. Harmonically, even that. If it sounds good, it is good. Eddie Van Halen, harmony thick, melody thick, just any note you want. Just depends on how your taste is and how you use it, and what your mojo is or something. Miles Davis said, music ain't nothing but the attitude of the motherfucker playing the horn. It's your attitude as much as it is what you play. Anybody can play the same notes, but how do you put it? How do you feel it? How do you phrase it? Kind of thing, there's that. And so, and I got into some of that studying it, but I don't really like the sound of jazz that much, enough to be a fusion player anymore. I'm not interested in that really. But it doesn't mean I don't know about it. It doesn't mean I don't try it or think about it or even play it sometimes. It's just not my bag, really. Once you start being a fusion player, they don't want you to play anything else, it seems like to me. Once you're Alan Holdsworth, that's all you get to play, and I like to play anything. But whatever. Alan Holdsworth was the greatest guitarist greatest electric guitarist I believe ever lived, and I think Jeff Berlin is the best bass player that ever lived, electric bass player. And they were in the same band called Bruford. Great band, by the way. But anyway, now with country I like even less than jazz. I don't like country. I guess the rhythms can be, I don't even know what the rhythms are. I don't care really enough to know. I don't know. Is it straight? Is it swung? Is it both? Is it either or? I don't know. They use pentatonic scales, which is 5-note scales, and they use triads. Very dumb European folk music or something. I don't know. I don't like it. I just go, can you play something else, please? You just have, 1, 4, 5, but they're triads, not even 7th chords. Just if you're in C country, it's just C, F, G. Just simple dumb, play it dumb. And then if you, for your solo, just play C major pentatonic. Don't even play a C major scale if all it's, twists and turns. Just play a C major pentatonic scale over C, F, and G. Ugh. It's like pea soup without any peas, or without any ham, or just broth, chicken broth. I don't like it. That's me. Some people love it. Good for you. Go play it then. Anyway, love you guys. Peace, love, and rock and roll.